This is Story Recapped. Today I'm gonna explain an action, comedy, and sci-fi film called The Tuxedo. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. At Banning Springs Bottling Factory, Wallace, an undercover agent, secretly calls the Central Security Agency. He requests for another agent as the mission reaches level 2, but he's put on hold. Suddenly, a man places a bag over Wallace's head and fills it with water. When the man unhooks him, Wallace falls, dead. In the city, Jimmy Tong admires a woman from outside an art gallery and practices talking to her. He tells his friend Mitch that she's the girl of his dreams, so Mitch advises him to invite her out but avoid being himself. Emboldened, Jimmy walks up to the woman but chickens out. Seeing Jimmy's blunder, the gallery owner tells Jimmy to ask her out quickly so she can turn him down already. Dejected, Jimmy walks to his taxi and practices again. When the woman exits, Jimmy rushes to talk to her. However, a cyclist hits the taxi's door and flips over. Jimmy apologizes, but the man angrily grabs him. Jimmy pulls the window up to break free, but the man smashes it. Jimmy tries to escape, but his foot is caught. Jimmy sees his dream girl watching and tries to downplay the situation, but the man chases him. Jimmy almost gets hit by a limousine, but he jumps and slides over it. He slips beneath his taxi, so the man jumps and dents the roof. Mitch intervenes, brandishing a metal pipe. Luckily, a cop arrives, and the cyclist retreats. Jimmy is miffed at the unlucky day he's having. He gets in the taxi to straighten out the roof and finds a woman in the back seat. The woman hires his services, and Jimmy happily obliges. On the way, the woman introduces herself as Stina, who runs information on Jimmy. Stina mentions Jimmy's reputation as a speedy driver and his records of speeding tickets, but Jimmy's proud to have no record of accidents. Stina challenges him to reach their destination before her makeup is done for double the fare. Jimmy zips through narrow alleys and streets. To avoid a blocked street, Jimmy deftly drives in reverse against oncoming traffic. They quickly arrive at the address, and Stina is pleased. She offers him a high-paying chauffeur job and hands him Clark Devlin's business card. The following morning, Jimmy meets Stina at Devlin's mansion. She gives him a rule book and emphasizes rule number 1: never talk directly to Mr. Devlin. Later, Jimmy wears a chauffeur uniform but struggles with a tie until Clark Devlin gets in. Jimmy nervously stares at him until Devlin comments on it. Along the way, Devlin berates the CSA's head of intelligence over the phone, ordering him to investigate Wallace's disappearance. After hanging up, Devlin talks to Jimmy, but Jimmy quickly remembers rule number 1. Devlin good-naturedly says he hates the rules, so Jimmy relaxes. At the CSA headquarters, the examiner tells Director Chalmers that Wallace fell and drowned in his bathtub. However, Del Blaine suggests that Wallace was murdered. She explains that although there's water in Wallace's lungs, blood tests show he died of thirst. They also found minerals from branded bottled water and a unique strain of bacteria. Impressed, Chalmers offers her a special field operation with Devlin. At an insectarium, Jimmy watches Devlin effortlessly charm a beautiful clerk. Before leaving, Devlin invites the woman to a party at his house. Outside, Jimmy asks how Devlin got to be so smooth. Devlin replies that they have the same instincts, only he lacks confidence. Inside the car, Devlin calls Stina and asks her to get Jimmy a suit. That night, Devlin dances with the insectarium clerk. Jimmy is fascinated as Devlin slides across the floor and dips his partner in an impossible manner. After dancing, a waiter stumbles, but Devlin superbly bends to save the drinks. The next day, Jimmy sees a tuxedo in a glass case in Devlin's walk-in closet. As Jimmy examines the suit, Devlin appears and sternly tells him never to touch his tuxedo. On the way to get dinner, Devlin sketches an insect on a note and folds it. Devlin treats Jimmy at a drive-thru, and their food arrives instantly, shocking Jimmy. Devlin also orders a pizza that secretly has a sealed envelope. As Jimmy drives, a skateboarder gets hit by the car. Another skater covertly sticks a tracking device behind them. When they drive away, the skateboarder sticks a bomb on the skateboard, which follows the car. Devlin sees the skateboard and tells Jimmy that it's a bomb. Realizing he's serious, Jimmy deftly zips through traffic to lose the skateboard, but they're soon blocked. They quickly exit, and Devlin pushes Jimmy to safety before their car explodes. The two survive, but Devlin's head bleeds, and he collapses. Jimmy asks who did this, and Devin utters, "Walter Strider." Jimmy calls for help as Devlin hands him his ID, where Devlin's information quickly changes. He also instructs Jimmy to wear his watch before passing out. As Jimmy waits for updates on Devlin's condition, he examines Devlin's things and opens the envelope from the pizza box, but it quickly self-destructs. The nurse says Devlin must stay and hands Jimmy a note that Devlin was clutching. Jimmy sees that it's Devlin's note with the insect sketch. At Banning Inc.'s floating headquarters, Lundeen meets CEO Dietrich Banning. Before he arrives, Banning tells the scientist, Dr. Sims, that he chose Lundeen for questioning his growing projections. When Lundeen arrives, Banning offers him a glass of water while allowing him to explain his views on the company. Banning and Sims eagerly observe Lundeen's distress as he drinks the water. Sims hooks Lundeen to a device, asking if he's thirsty. Banning divulges that they're using Lundeen to test water that makes people thirsty, while Sims explains that it's due to a bacteria that causes dehydration once ingested. Lundeen falls while Sims and Banning are casually displeased with the instantaneous effects. Lundeen is soon reduced to a dried-up husk, which Banning easily breaks apart. Meanwhile, Jimmy goes through Devlin's address book at the mansion but finds no Walter Strider. Devlin's watch suddenly opens the glass case, allowing Jimmy to wear the tuxedo. The tuxedo automatically zips and adjusts to Jimmy's proportions. The nanosensors inside map Jimmy's neurological structure, allowing him to tie his bow perfectly. A computer announces that the suit's a high-tech tactical uniform, controlled through the watch. Jimmy checks the watch and mistakenly sets it to demolition, sending him flipping backward. He spins on a chandelier and eventually gets hold of samurai blades, completely wrecking the place. He then sets it to shake booty mode and dances. Next, he switches to anti-gravity mode, walks on a wall, and hangs on a ceiling rafter. Devlin's phone rings, and Jimmy falls trying to answer it. Thinking he's Devlin, Blaine is on the other line, telling Jimmy about Banning's meeting with water company CEOs. Jimmy asks about Walter Strider, but Blaine doesn't know. She tells him to meet her the next day, where she'll wear a gray suit. The next day, Jimmy mistakes a different woman for Blaine and tells her their obscene code, offending her. Blaine calls him later to tell him that they'll meet that evening instead. That night, Jimmy arrives in Devlin's tuxedo. He pretends to be Devlin but claims he hasn't read their mission's file. While they climb to the rooftop, Blaine debriefs him about Wallace's undercover mission in Banning's factory and death. On the rooftop, Blaine presents a high-tech device to plant a bug at the meeting. While Blaine scouts the area, Jimmy sets the tuxedo into rifle assembly mode. The rifle is assembled swiftly, and Jimmy shoots but misses. He sets the watch to sniper rifle mode and fires again, letting the listening device attach to a guest. At Banning's headquarters, Banning announces that they've developed a filtration process that would protect the companies. He offers this to the water company CEOs in exchange for half of their assets. Blaine listens in, unaware that Jimmy's already fighting Banning's henchmen. Jimmy sets the tuxedo to auto-response fighting mode to attack. When Jimmy's subdued, Blaine finally realizes the situation. While Jimmy fights two men, Blaine faces one, though she's inexperienced in combat. The man apprehends her, so she bites his arm and kicks him while Jimmy ties up the others. However, Jimmy gets punched and flips over the railings. Blaine grabs him but can't pull Jimmy up, so he falls off with Blaine's ring. As Jimmy plummets, the tuxedo allows him to climb back up, but Blaine's gone. Jimmy sees her descending, but more henchmen arrive, so he hangs under the bridge and slides down. When metal pipes fall, he's hit in the head and falls into a cement container. Blaine leaves in Devlin's car, so Jimmy runs after her. With the tuxedo's help, he catches up and jumps into the passenger seat. Reaching a parking lot, Blaine storms out and blames him for ending her career just when it began. She eases when Jimmy says it's his first time. Jimmy returns her ring and apologizes. Appeased, Blaine grabs his shoulder, but the tuxedo triggers and sends her spinning. Blaine angrily gets in her car and leaves. The next day, Jimmy visits an unconscious Devlin, admitting that being him isn't easy. Suddenly, Blaine calls, informing him of another mission. Devlin awakens and tries to communicate, but Jimmy doesn't understand. The nurse finds Jimmy, so he hurriedly leaves. That evening, Jimmy meets Blaine at a prestigious event. She gives him a corsage with a camera that feeds footage to her compact. Jimmy fails to let them in with bribery, so Blaine tricks the guards at the back. Inside, they meet that night's performer, James Brown. Jimmy hurries to meet the singer, and they share pleasantries. However, James taps Jimmy's shoulder, triggering the tuxedo and knocking him out. To make Banning stay, Jimmy performs on stage. He uses the tuxedo to sound and dance like James Brown. Blaine is surprised, and Jimmy catches the attention of Banning's fiancée, Cheryl, much to Banning's irritation. Later, Blaine tells Jimmy to get information from Cheryl, so he goes to Banning's table. As Banning puts a cigarette to his mouth, the tuxedo reflexively lights it. Jimmy takes Cheryl dancing while Blaine seduces Banning. Jimmy gets nothing from Cheryl, but Banning falls for Blaine and mentions being at his laboratory when he can't sleep. Before he divulges more, a henchman whispers to Banning that Blaine is an agent and Jimmy is Devlin. Banning is vexed as he thought Devlin didn't survive the skateboard bomb. Using Cheryl to entrap Jimmy, Banning leaves and hands her the room keys. Cheryl suggests that Jimmy should join her before leaving. Though Blaine is disgusted with the idea, she agrees to cover for him while he interrogates Cheryl. As Jimmy meets Cheryl, Blaine watches the camera feed on her compact by the pool. However, Jimmy soon learns that Cheryl knows nothing. Cheryl takes out a cigarette, and again, the tuxedo reflexively lights it. When Jimmy comments on her insect brooch, Cheryl hands it to him. Her dress falls, and despite Jimmy's refusals, Cheryl forcefully takes his suit off. At the poolside, a henchman attacks Blaine. She fights him off, but they fall into the pool. Upstairs, Jimmy tricks Cheryl into heading to the bathroom. However, Banning's henchmen break in and attack. Jimmy quickly puts the pants on and fights with only one leg in. As he tries to put the other leg in, more men arrive. Jimmy struggles to zip up while one leg holds off the men. He finally wears the pants properly, and the pants allow him to slide out from under a coffee table and roll a man in the air. The henchmen flee, and Jimmy puts on the suit. He hears Blaine screams as she's being drowned in the pool. A man attacks Jimmy from behind, and he unwittingly launches him out to Blaine's attacker, saving her. Later, Jimmy treats Blaine's wounds as she whines about being partnered with him. Jimmy says she needs to recognize others' feelings, so he playfully makes faces for her to guess. Blaine gets all the answers wrong, so Jimmy claims it's why she got nothing from Banning. However, Blaine figures out that Banning's lab is under his house since he mentioned spending sleepless nights there. Blaine suggests reporting to Chalmers, but Jimmy refuses, fearing she'll discover his identity. Challenging his confidence, Blaine asks Jimmy what he knows about her. Jimmy only knows that her name is Del Blaine, but she reveals that her real name is Delilah. At the CSA headquarters, Stina reviews the footage from the corsage and discovers that Jimmy's pretending to be Devlin. The next night, Blaine and Jimmy attend a party at Banning's estate. Jimmy duplicates an invitation using the tuxedo to get in. They dance to blend in and soon follow men carrying water tanks. However, they get lost and end up in a private pool area. Jimmy kicks pebbles into the water and notices that they don't sink. He steps over and appears to walk on water. Amazed, Blaine crawls on the diving board, activating the secret entrance to the laboratory. The two descend, and they find cleaners discussing a queen. When they leave, Blaine and Jimmy investigate. Unknown to them, henchmen are alerted of their presence. Using a computer, Blaine uncovers the dehydrating water that Banning is developing. As she tries to understand how they'll release it, the henchmen arrive. Jimmy uses the tuxedo's cloaking function to hide and sneak out. They return to the party and dance as they brainstorm ways to release the bacteria. Jimmy comments on Blaine's intellect, but Blaine admits her inexperience and that she's only bluffing her way through. When Jimmy disagrees, she urges him to be honest. Hearing this, Jimmy tries to confess, but Stina calls Blaine, revealing his secret first. Blaine drags Jimmy to the men's room and, at gunpoint, orders Jimmy to remove his clothes. They find a guest in a cubicle, so Blaine orders him to take the clothes. Jimmy tries to explain, but Blaine thinks he harmed the real Clark Devlin, so she leaves with the tuxedo. At the party, Blaine is taken to Banning. Thinking quickly, she offers Banning the tuxedo, though she secretly activates a tracking device in her necklace, alerting the CSA to send reinforcements. Jimmy returns to Devlin's mansion and writes a goodbye letter. He apologizes for not finding Walter Strider and for losing the tuxedo. As he finishes, Jimmy spills water and notices a photo of an insect under the water drops. He compares it to Cheryl's brooch and realizes that Devlin was identifying the insect Water Strider instead. In Banning's laboratory, Blaine learns that they'll use the Striders to spread the bacteria. However, Blaine says it won't work since the species are from the southern hemisphere and won't seek water in the northern hemisphere. Sims denies this, but Blaine convinces Banning to wear the tuxedo and prove her loyalty. Meanwhile, Jimmy finds the other tuxedo Devlin ordered for him. Banning wears the tuxedo and demonstrates its abilities. The security alarm is triggered, and, thinking it's CSA, Blaine threatens Banning. However, the guards deliver a beaten-up Jimmy, and Blaine's cover is blown. Banning orders to release the Striders. As the insects hatch, Banning flips Jimmy over, still thinking he's Devlin. However, Jimmy reveals his true identity and shoves Banning away. He then helps Blaine break free. Jimmy reveals his own tuxedo and fights Banning. Banning launches an attack seamlessly, while Jimmy fights him and his henchmen. While they fight, Blaine spills acid on the computer, stopping the Striders' release. Banning is forced to open the hatch manually, so he rises using the tuxedo. Jimmy pulls on his leg, but Banning kicks him off and opens the hatch. As the Strider Queen is being released, Banning catches Blaine and Jimmy in chokeholds. Thinking quickly, Jimmy puts a cigarette from Banning's pocket onto Blaine's mouth. The tuxedo reflexively lights the cigarette, releasing Jimmy, who knocks Banning out. The Striders still wait for the Queen, so Jimmy grabs the Queen's pod and runs. Alarms blare as the two try to leave. More men block them, and while they fend them off, Blaine accidentally bumps into Jimmy. The pod drops and shatters, releasing the Queen. They watch as the Queen flies, eventually settling on Blaine's nose. Jimmy quickly traps it in a shot glass while the men attack. Jimmy keeps the Queen trapped on Blaine's body while fighting. Soon, Banning awakens and runs screaming, so Jimmy hurls the queen into his open mouth. Banning swallows and gets infected with a bacteria. The Striders swarm Banning as he instantaneously shrivels up and dies. CSA forces finally arrive. Chalmers congratulates Blaine, but she gives the honor to Jimmy. Jimmy expresses his honor to serve the country, then asks for one favor. Eventually, a recovered Devlin leads the operation to help Jimmy talk to his dream girl. Jimmy arrives and enters the gallery while an agent neutralizes the owner. Jimmy reaches the woman, but the agents feed him conflicting advice from his earpiece, confusing him. Jimmy ends up saying the wrong words, so the girl gets alarmed and threatens to mace him. Outside, Jimmy complains to Blaine how he can't talk around beautiful women, offending Blaine. When Jimmy asks why she's upset, she makes a face to make Jimmy guess. Finally, Blaine admits that nobody's ever done something special like that for her. Jimmy jokes that it's because she's annoying, so Blaine leaves. Still, Jimmy invites her for coffee, which she accepts. The two then head to their date.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.